Isn't it?
Well, that was interesting. I heard that as well, Nick. On Friday, the meeting of the UN Human Rights Council will be to vote and to discuss a draft resolution, which has already come out. This is for the member states of the Council, and there's already been disappointment expressed by the resolution. It's eerily similar to the wording from the United Nations Security Council, and there's already been disappointment expressed because it has things like strongly condemns, strongly calls for immediate release of detained person, urges Libyan authorities. That's typical United Nations lingo for those member states. And as I said, there's been disappointment expressed on the week's nature of that statement. On Monday, when Clinton goes to Geneva, she will be meeting at a different level of diplomats. That's foreign ministers from across the European Union as well. I would suspect that she is trying to have a different level of talks with them to see if they can build some kind of consensus, which won't involve as much backdoor wrangling and as much consideration of those relationships I talked about between African nations, Asian nations and others that might have ties with China and Russia and Cuba, other member states which have historically proved reluctant to meddle in other countries' domestic affairs.
There's something else that captures the attention as well, isn't it? We kind of alluded to this yesterday, but we're seeing a quite different approach, aren't we, from the United Nations to Libya when you consider how they were with Egypt when it wasn't even on the agenda when that crisis was in full swing. Why do you think that is?
Well, the people that we've spoken to here say that when Tunisia and then Egypt fell, they were relatively violent. The United Nations Security Council didn't get involved because they considered that certainly a domestic situation. And when the governments collapsed and when the dictators fled, there was generally not as much violence. And the protests and the demonstrations were relatively violent. And I use the word relatively with circumspect. When it comes to the situation in Libya, one diplomat said to me just today, we have not seen this kind of draconian measures. We're not seeing mercenaries being introduced. We didn't see in Egypt that their own aircraft were bombing their own people. They said this has gone up to, and the escalation of violence and the measures of violence that have been taken in Libya are unprecedented, and they were not seen in Tunisia and Egypt. Therefore, the UN Security Council is obliged to step in. There's also a legal concept being floated around the United Nations here, Nick, called the responsibility to protect. That was something born in 2005 by the United Nations, which says that the UN has a responsibility to step in when a government is in the throes or could potentially wipe out some of its own population. Again, Russia and China and other member states may be reluctant to step in, but that is a legal obligation. It's never really been put into practice with any real effect, but that concept is being floated around as perhaps a reason for the Security Council to intervene in the situation with Libya.
Interesting. OK, Kath Turner, United Nations, thanks very much. Well, throughout the uprising in Libya, there have been persistent claims that Colonel Gaddafi has been using mercenaries against anti-government supporters, and there has been intense speculation about where they may have been recruited from. Among the countries suggested are Chad, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Niger, Mali, Sudan, Tunisia, Morocco and even South Africa. And there's been speculation from journalists that up to 10,000 foreign fighters had been recruited to the Libyan army, and that's long before the current unrest. And these include fighters from Chad who had sided with Gaddafi in his conflict with the Central African country and were later given Libyan citizenship. And this is something we want to take on now. I'm joined by Ali Abuzakuk, who's a director of the Libya Human and Political Development Forum. Welcome to AlJazeera, Mr. Abuzakuk. A lot of speculation here, of course, but from what you know, who are these mercenaries? Where are they from and why do they come to do it?
First of all, if we know where they're coming for money. Mercenaries usually go after money, and whoever has money can create mercenaries. They are available in the international market. And Gaddafi, knowing that he has some kind of a leaning toward Africa, he has, I think, recruited many citizens of the poor African countries, and gave them money and trained them. We have discovered, and the people of the uprising have shown passports and people, they have arrested them from all these nations, from even Ethiopia, by the way.
Right, so all these countries that we mentioned, Ethiopia as well.
And Egypt and Tunisia.
Right, and so the stories that we've been hearing of mercenaries and the kind of images like these that we've been seeing of them purportedly on the streets, repeatedly opening fire without warning on peaceful protesters and so on. Does that ring true to you?
It is, and I mean, credible, sources inside the country have told us that they have really created havoc in the streets of Benghazi, in the streets of Bayda, and they are doing it now in the streets of Tripoli. These are the people who have no, respect to the other side. Libyan soldiers and Libyan security people, no matter how much they may obey the orders, they still have some kind of an understanding that these are their citizens, these are their brothers, these are their uncles. So that kind of, an affinity is there. But when you bring a mercenary, he has nothing he has no compassion whatsoever.
He's just killing for money.
He's killing for money. The more he kills, the more money he gets.
So in that case, how big is the supply of mercenaries? Can it be stopped?
Whatever is inside Libya, it's not easy to stop because they are there. But we know from credible reports that Ahmed Gaddafi, his cousin, who used to be the prince of, the Gaddafi prince in Egypt, is recruiting many people from the western side of Fayoum and the tribes who live in the desert.
Okay, so given that, this idea that a no-fly zone should be implemented across Libya, and therefore would stop planes bringing mercenaries in, presumably, you think that would be important?
That will be important in one side, because that is a necessity not to let Gaddafi's air force interfere or be used against the people. But also, we called upon the Egyptian new, Revolutionary Command Council, or whatever they call them, the Supreme Council of the military there, to really safeguard the borders so that nobody will infiltrate from the eastern border of Libya to inside Libya. And Gaddafi's cousin, Ahmed Gaddafi, is doing that. He's trying to recruit thousands of people from there and to penetrate Libya from the eastern side.
And these borders are pretty porous, are they?
They are, huge borders, and
right.
And the people of the desert, they can penetrate the borders any place they want.
Right, big problem. Okay, Ali Abuzakuk, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much. Thank you. Okay, that's it from Washington for the time being. I'll be back a little later in the program with more international reaction to the unrest in Libya, including a look at the lengths that governments are going to in order to get their citizens out of the country. For now, though, it's back to Doreen in Doha.
All right, Nick, thank you very much for that. Well, Libya's President Muammar Gaddafi has always promoted himself as one of Africa's great leaders, touting a vision of progress and wealth for the entire continent, in fact. And now, after a week of violence in Libya, the African Union has condemned his actions against the pro-democracy movement. Yvonne Ndege reports from Abuja.
The images of violence in Libya have appalled Africans across the continent, as they have the whole world. Especially because the man at the center of the crisis, Muammar Gaddafi, has positioned himself as a champion of the continent, vigorously promoting the Pan-Africanist idea of a United States of Africa, one in which he would be president. A continent with one army, one passport, one currency, called the Afro. So what will become of Colonel Gaddafi's vision if he's toppled from power in Libya?
The exit of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya will have some tremendous consequences on the capacity, especially in terms of the tremendous energy and resources that he has dedicated towards ensuring that African unity